Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto and Mito married and had kids part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Jakofplatisks for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. Naruto walked alone through the streets of Tizuna's town. Though conscious, Sasuke was still bedridden due to the injuries he suffered during the fight with Haku. Unfortunately, Sakura had decided to add to Naruto's already guilty conscience by blaming him for the Uchiha's condition. After several minutes of watching the boy get berated, Kakashi decided to ask her what she would have done in that particular situation. After sputtering for a bit, an ashamed Sakura walked off to another part of Tizuna's house. The damage had been done though, and Naruto walked out, saying that he was going to walk around the village. To add insult to injury, he had people cheerfully waving to him throughout the day. He was essentially a hero in Wave, yet he knew that his best friend had nearly been killed because of him. It was a sobering thought. Hell, he felt like shit that both Zabuza and Haku had been killed, and those two had been trying to kill all of them. If Sasuke had been killed as well. The blonde shook his head at the thought. He didn't even want to think about it. Hey, there's one of them now. Naruto vaguely heard another person say from his right. It wasn't the first time someone had pointed him out. He was easy enough to see after all. Hey, kid. It was the first time one of them had decided to call out to him though. He followed the voice to a man behind a stand. The man gestured towards the stand. Hey hero, are you hungry? Naruto's stomach decided to answer for both of them, quite loudly in fact. Naruto held his stomach with both hands, his cheeks red. The man behind the stand was old, easily as old as the Hokage. Aside from the major age difference, the man actually kinda looked like Iruka, right down to the horizontal scar across his nose. How about a bowl in the house? He couldn't say no to that. What do you have? The boy asked as he sat down next to another of the stand's patrons. Ramen, best in all the nations. Naruto smirked. I don't know, I think the best ramen belongs to Ichiraku stand back in my village. The old man smirked right back. Just sit back kid and watch the master at work. I'll make you forget about the other guy. The chef turned his back to his patrons and went back to cooking. So I was telling the young lady next to you about what you folks did for us. Naruto turned and took a look at the young lady next to him for the first time. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than him. She was taller than he was, probably by about a foot. She had long red hair that fell halfway down her back. She wore a simple black blouse with a plaid red and black skirt, which greatly contrasted her pale skin tone. She looked back at him with dark blue eyes. Her most notable feature was a small diamond on her forehead. That he was. Takeshi-san explained that you and your team were responsible for saving this country. That is quite an accomplishment, especially for one quite so young. Naruto blushed at the girl's praise. Thanks, sisses. I'm a ninja though, it's what I do. The girl frowned. Oh, so ninjas regularly save villages from tyrannical rulers. The boy looked away at the girl's comment. Well, I mean, that was rather ignorant of him. He knew for a fact that saving countries wasn't what ninja normally did. Still, it sounded a lot cooler than saying that he was a highly trained mercenary. He tried to find a way to answer, but found himself unable to. After a while, he heard a giggling sound next to him. He turned back to stare at her, blush still on his cheeks. The girl had her right hand covering her mouth. I apologize, it was impolite of me to laugh at you. She gazed at him with sapphire eyes. Honestly, I think I prefer your answer to the truth really. You do? The girl nodded. You have an air of chivalry about you that I thought was long gone from this world. The smile she gave him, once again, made his cheeks heat up. She's pretty, he silently thought. So, are you not from around here? The girl shook her head. I am not. Oh dear, please excuse me, but I do not believe we have been properly introduced. Naruto flashed her his patented grin. Name's Uzumaki Naruto. The girl dropped the chopstick she had been holding and just stared at the boy before her. Her blue eyes wide with shock. Uzumaki. Naruto, not sensing her shock, nodded. Yup, the future Hokage of Konoha. For several moments, the girl just stared at him with a scrutinizing stare. It was beginning to unnerve the boy. And you are? The boy's question seemed to knock her out of her daze. She blinked a few times before lightly clearing her throat. Please excuse my rudeness. My name is Mito. Simultaneously, 5 different figures suddenly shuddered in pure, unadulterated fear. 1. The sounds of laughter could be heard coming out of Takeshi's ramen stand. Naruto had greatly enjoyed the bowl of beef ramen that Takeshi had made for him and had quickly ordered a second bowl. While they were eating, Naruto had been regaling Mito with tales of the pranks he pulled during his academy years. She listened to all of them with a cute little giggle that she tried to hide behind one hand. Then he told her about the time he painted graffiti on the Hokage's monument. She had let go of whatever reservation she held and began laughing full force. And you say you were at the bottom of your class? Mito asked with a sense of mirth in her voice. I dare say Konoha's standards have improved quite a bit. Naruto, ignoring the embarrassment of being the class dope, just cocked an eyebrow at the girl's second statement, have you been to Konoha before? Mito nodded, a long time ago. Mito turned back to Naruto, so, from village prankster to savior of a whole country. I must imagine your parents will be quite proud of you. The blonde frowned at the statement. I don't have parents. The girl frowned at the way Naruto said that. You never knew them? The boy shook his head. And I doubt they'd be all that proud anyway. I screwed up on the mission. Oh? The boy just nodded at the girl's question. Mito turned away from him and took another long sip of her green tea. After placing it down she turned to the boy, are you finished? She asked, pulling her small purse out of her blouse. He had only a little bit of broth left in his bowl. Almost. His eyes widened when she placed a large amount of money down on the table. Enough to cover both tabs. Follow me, Naru-kun. With that, she walked away from the ramen stand. Naruto slowly followed the girl with his eyes, more than a little surprised that she had actually paid for his meal. Hey kid. Naruto's head snapped towards Takeshi. The old man rested one hand on the bar and leaned down to look into the kid's eyes. Piece of advice, don't let that one get away. The blonde blushed at the comment. He figured he had two choices before him. He could either go back to Tazuna's house and sit around doing nothing, or he could follow the cute girl. In a move that would later make a certain Toad Sage proud, the blonde decided to listen to Takeshi's advice and follow the girl after quickly finishing his broth. He reached her quickly enough. Mito walked in a grace that he normally attributed to the wives of feudal lords that sometimes visited the Konoha. Her body was perfectly perpendicular to the ground and she seemed to glide across the ground. 2. Tell me about the battle, why do you think you did something wrong? The blonde looked down and opened his mouth to speak. Please don't slouch. Naruto's back immediately straightened. He looked at her with a perplexed gaze. Well. Naruto relayed what happened during the battle on the bridge. How he announced his presence. How he walked into the obvious trap. And how he couldn't do anything while he was in said obvious trap. Throughout his whole explanation, Mito hadn't so much as looked back at him. She simply kept looking forward. You understand what you did wrong, that is good. It is an excellent lesson to learn, and it is lucky that you did not lose a comrade to learn it. Naruto nodded, seeing the sense in her words. He certainly wouldn't do something so stupid again. You simply need to improve yourself in the event that you find yourself in a similar situation again. Again, Naruto nodded. Naruto followed Mito into a large inn. Though it seemed that the building was, at one point, a nice establishment, it seemed that Wave Country's hard times had hit the inn as badly as the rest of the country. Mito leads Naruto to one of the rooms on the second floor of the inn. Mito gestured for Naruto to sit down at the little table while she went to the little kitchen. While waiting for the girl to come back, Naruto looked around the room. Like the rest of the hotel, it looked like it could have been a luxurious place at one point. Gato's influence was most likely the cause of its decline. After a few moments, Mito placed a cup of tea in front of Naruto and a second one in front of an empty chair. She then sat down at the table as well. There's an old saying, hindsight is 20/20. Mito began. Tell me, now that you are out of danger, can you think of anything you could have done differently while you were in that trap? The blonde frowned, I honestly don't know. Mito took a quick sip of her tea. In your position, I would have erected some type of barrier to protect my ally and myself from the needles. Naruto's eyes widened, you're a ninja. Not quite. The redhead took another sip of her tea. However, I am proficient in various shinobi arts, and I'm a master of Fuin. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. He vaguely remembered Iruka going over something called Fuin during his time at the academy, but he didn't quite remember what they were. What's Fuin? Mito, surprised for the first time since learning Naruto's name, nearly choked on her tea. You do not know Fuin, her eyes narrowed, and Naruto actually looked away from her. Mito stood from her seat and went to grab a few items from a nearby table. She placed a piece of paper and a pen on the table and sat down again. She then pulled a kunai from seemingly nowhere. I'm going to show you how to seal this kunai into this paper. She began by using the pen to draw strange symbols on the piece of paper. After she had finished, she placed the kunai on the paper and concentrated some chakra through it. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw the kunai disappear. Whoa, that's cool. Mito, for her part, seemed quite pleased at the boy's reaction. So Fuin Jutsu lets you seal items away. To use another saying, that is merely the tip of the iceberg. She pulled out another piece of paper and placed it in front of Naruto. It's difficult to learn, but the rewards are only limited by your own imagination. Would you like to learn? Naruto was a bit surprised that she was actually willing to teach him. However, he nodded. Naruto learned that Fuin was like a different language entirely. It was essentially writing out what you wanted to happen on paper. It also had, much to Naruto's dismay, several thousand different characters. Mito promised that she'd teach Naruto as much as she could during what little time they had together. By the end of the night, Naruto walked back to Tezuna's house, mentally going over some of the characters that Mito had taught him. The blonde eventually returned to Tezuna's home a few hours after nightfall. So lost in thought, the blonde walked through the house without even noticing that both Kakashi and Tezuna had been sitting up waiting for him. The older man just watched as the boy walked right past them. Well, he doesn't seem that upset at all. No kidding, Kakashi said with a frown hidden behind his mask. He had originally wanted to give the boy some time to get over his Sakura's words before talking to him about the battle. Naruto had spent so much time out that Kakashi had been seconds from going out to look for him. What he didn't expect was for the boy to come waltzing in, looking on like he was on cloud 9. If I didn't know better, I'd swear he just got laid. Ha, Tezuna laughed. Kakashi was once offered the position as Naruto's foster father, which he immediately declined. It wasn't that he didn't want to look after the boy, quite the opposite actually. It was simply that Kakashi didn't want Naruto to end up like him. Case in point. Kakashi could barely even remember the 8 years following Naruto's birth and Minato's demise. It was honestly a long blur of drinking and high-profile missions. He vaguely remembered something about saving some chick from Snow Country, but everything else came in a haze. However, much to Kakashi's disappointment, Naruto nearly ended up becoming like him after all. Naruto nearly lost a friend and teammate as a result of his own mistakes. Luckily, the blonde seemed to understand the magnitude of his actions. Kakashi had wanted to go speak with the blonde, maybe have one of those sensei-student bonding moments, but didn't get to him before Sakura did. He had wanted to give the boy a few hours to calm down before talking to him. The following day, Naruto left the Tezuna's house bright and early, saying that he was going out to the village. Kakashi left around the same time with Tezuna, who still had to go work on the bridge. The two adults returned to the house before dusk and Naruto still hadn't arrived. After about half an hour he was about to go out looking for him when the boy inexplicably arrived again wearing a shit-eating grin. That night Sakura actually came up to him and apologized for what she said the day before. The boy's reaction was, essentially, yeah sure whatever, much to the surprise of the members of Team 7. The day after, Kakashi created a cage bunshin to follow the blonde throughout the village. A couple hours later found Kakashi lounging around the side of the nearly finished bridge, reading his book, when the memory of the cage bunshin suddenly entered his mind's eye. Kakashi's book actually fell out of his hand as he scanned through the clone's memories. Naruto had gone to go see a girl that looked about 3 years older than he was, and he went to go see her at her apartment. Summary. Naruto went to visit an older girl at her apartment. Considering the boy's mood over the last few days, it was likely that he had been seeing her since Sakura's outburst. There was only one logical conclusion that Kakashi could come to. Some pretty young thing, and yay she was pretty, had decided to thank the younger boy for helping free her country by introducing him to the world of casual. That, in Kakashi's opinion, was freaking awesome. It was also a common plot point in several stories of Jiraiya's infamous book series. Still, Kakashi's clone had decided to keep watching the blonde through a conveniently open window to make sure everything was on the up and up. Kakashi presumed that the girl was from one of the better-off families in Wave. He based the presumption on the girl's clothing. Though he didn't normally pay much attention to fashion, the outfits she wore were clearly not the same as the people from Wave. They seemed like they may have come from a more modern village, like perhaps one on Konoha's level. Perhaps she had them imported. It was either that or she was a traveler, she was staying at an inn. Could she be an enemy Kunoichi? Unlikely, she didn't seem to actively be trying to seduce the blonde. Through his vantage point, the only thing the clone saw them doing was drawing. Writing. Curious. Either way, it seemed innocent enough so Kakashi clone didn't feel like starting a confrontation. Perhaps the girl's family owned the inn. Either way, he decided to leave Naruto at least until the boy was ready to talk about it himself. There was the bro code to consider after all. After thinking about it though, he decided that he'd need to teach the boy, both boys actually, to be safe. Girls were generally taught those before graduating from the academy. Thinking about it, Kakashi realized that there was a horrible double standard in there somewhere, however he didn't care enough at the moment to consider it further. He needed to consider Naruto's actions. 4 days after the battle of the Bridge. Hey Naruto. Surprised, for he didn't think anyone was downstairs, Naruto turned towards the sound of the voice to see Kakashi coming towards him. Oh, hey Kaka-sensei. I thought you already left with Tezuna. He's waiting outside. Kakashi stopped right in front of Naruto and grasped the boy by his shoulder. Naruto glanced at the hand momentarily before turning back to Kakashi. He actually had tears in his visible eye. Kaka-sensei. Kakashi pulled Naruto into a manly hug. I just want to tell you that I'm so proud of you. Once again, Kakashi realized there was a horrible double standard in his own actions, for if it were Sakura who was entertaining some random boy, he probably would have broken the boy's legs by now. When they separated, Naruto looked at Kakashi with wide eyes. "I just wanted to tell you that," and Kakashi held out his hand to give Naruto something, which the boy accepted. "Be safe." With that, Kakashi left. Naruto just stared at the man's back in confusion. After Kakashi exited the house, Naruto looked down at the thing in his hand. Candy. Naruto opened the wrapper and pulled out a white circle. He wiggled it around in his hand, feels like rubber. He held it close to his nose and took a quick whiff of it and quickly pulled it away a second later. Little Naruto opened a nearby trash can and dumped it inside before walking away. "I hate kiwi-flavored candy." 5 days after the Battle of the Bridge. Naruto wasn't having a good day. Tazuna had gotten drunk the night before, an action that continued on to the early morning. Unfortunately, the old drunk had started dancing and ended up spilling beer all over everyone around him. Naruto's orange jacket still reeked of alcohol when he woke up. The man had been celebrating the fact that the bridge would finally be finished the following day, which unfortunately meant that the mission would be coming to an end soon. According to Tazuna, he just had a few last artistic touches put on the bridge, whatever that meant. And Kakashi, much to everyone else's displeasure, wanted to leave the very moment the bridge was finished, instead of waiting for the following morning. He was upset because he had actually grown fond of the old drunk, as well as Inari and Tsunami. Not to mention walking around a village where everyone actually praised him instead of wishing death on him. And when his mind turned to the young lady whom he spent the last few days with, it felt like he was in a vice grip. That morning he barely paid attention to the trip to her apartment, and before he knew it, he was knocking on her door. "Come in," came Mito's voice behind the door. Naruto let himself into the room Mito had been staying in. He found the girl in question sitting on the floor in a lotus position. Naruto's eyes immediately locked onto the ball of water that was currently floating in front of Mito's. "Hello Naru-kun." There is Mito stopped and immediately turned her head to the boy in question. Her eyes narrowed in on him and he immediately placed at the look. Though not nearly as overbearing as the aura of killer intent that Zabuza exuded, he still found it difficult to move. "Have you been drinking?" Naruto's eyes widened. "No. Tazuna was drinking and spilled beer all over me. I couldn't get it out." The red-deeded teen continued staring at Naruto for a few moments before the kai dissipated entirely, allowing the blind to let out a breath that he didn't know he had been holding. The man responsible for overseeing the construction of the bridge was drinking last night. The boy nodded. Mito turned away from him. "Forgive me for my anger and accusation, however I simply do not have a high opinion of alcohol or those who partake in it. There is another seal on the table, please have a look at it." Naruto turned to the table to find a rolled out scroll waiting for him. He had finally gotten sealing weapons and other items into scrolls the day before. The old man was celebrating. He said he'd be finishing the bridge pretty soon, the blonde said as he sat down at the table. Mito actually flinched at the boy's words. He spent a few minutes glancing over the different characters of the new seal before he decided to ask, "That's pretty cool, what are you doing?" "It's an elemental chakra control exercise. Do you know what your elemental affinity is with Naru-kun?" "No." Mito frowned. It wasn't the first time that she suspected there had been a serious gap in Naruto's education. Everybody has at least one innate elemental affinity. Your affinity allows you to use high-level ninjutsu of that particular element, as well as helping you learn ninjutsu of that particular element. Naruto nodded. Kinda like Sasuke and his fire. Mito frowned, but nodded, quite likely. Though in the case of low-level techniques, it is not actually necessary to have that particular affinity, having it does make those easier to learn. She stood up and walked towards the table, still with the orb of water around her. "This was a common exercise within my country. You use elemental chakra to levitate a sphere of your element, in my case water. It is a good meditation exercise." The orb of water floated over to just above her right hand and she held it out to Naruto. Amused by it, Naruto reached out and poked at the orb of water. Mito moved her hand over the seal on the table and activated it. Naruto watched wide-eyed as the water in his hand was sucked up into the seal. This particular seal is. The most common use is to carry drinking water with you. However, with a little cunning and preparation, one can also use this seal to block elemental ninjutsu. In Naruto's mind's eye, Sasuke was launching one of his fire techniques at him and he just casually flipped open a scroll that sucked all fire inside of it. The thought made Naruto grin. "Do you know when you will be leaving?" Naruto frowned. "Kaka-sensei wants to leave later today." Again, Mito frowned. "Then take it home with you." Naruto's eyes widened when she said that. "I doubt you will be able to memorize it one a single day. Since today will probably be our last day together for a while, I thought that we could wander around the village." Naruto immediately grinned. "That sounds good." Mito walked across the room and put on a pair of black shoes. Naruto nodded and rolled up the scroll and placed it in his right pocket. Where are we going? Just around the village. They both exited the room and walked out of the inn. So tell me about Konoha. Sadly, Naruto didn't know too much information, which Mito found relevant. He knew about places that he commonly visited, but nothing all too significant. However, Naruto swore that when he mentioned the old Hokage, he heard her say Hiro-chan was always such a good boy. Naruto. Both Naruto and Mito turned towards the sound of the voice to find Sakura and Sasuke staring back at them. The blonde waved at them, "Hey guys, what's up?" Sakura looked between Naruto and the girl he had been walking with. "Who's your friend?" "Oh yeah," Naruto gestured towards the girl. "This is my friend Mito." He then turned towards the girl in question. "And these are my teammates, Sakura and Sasuke team." Sakura frowned but greeted the girl with a small wave, "Mito-san." Sasuke merely grunted. The girl slightly bowed her head to Sakura-san. She then turned towards Naruto's male teammate. Her disposition took a notable turn. She just stared coolly at the boy for a few moments before saying, "Ichiha-san." Sasuke cocked an eyebrow. He figured the dope must have talked about all of them before, how else could she have learned his surname. "So what are you guys up to?" Tsunami-san asked Sasuke-kun and I to run some errands for her. "What are you two doing?" Naruto flashed her his trademark foxy grin. "Since this will probably be our last day here, we decided to walk around the village instead of hanging out in Mito's room all day." Sakura's eyes widened. Sasuke, for his part, was overcome by a strange and unfamiliar emotion. He was just so very proud of Naruto right now. He felt like he should be giving the boy a thumbs up for something. Maybe a pat on the back. After thinking it over, he finally settled for clearly praising the other boy for his accomplishment, HN. "So anyway, we should get going." Sakura was a bit surprised, sure. With that, Naruto and Mito walked away. They turned to the Uchiha with a slight scowl on her face. "I don't like her, I don't think she's right for Naruto." Sasuke just turned to stare at her for a moment. "What?" After a moment the boy just shook his head, "Don't be a stereotype." With that, he walked off, leaving Sakura alone with her confusion. 3. Some ways down the road, Mito turned to her companion. "Tell me about the graduation exam you had to take, Naruto-kun." Again, Naruto frowned. For a moment he thought about embellishing the truth to outright lying to her. However, instincts compelled him not to do either. In the end, he listened to his instincts and told her the truth. Though since the Hokage had labeled the Mizuki incident classified, he explained that he graduated after learning a powerful technique and defeating one of his former senseis. Which really wasn't far from the truth. Mito just stared at him for several moments. She knew that Naruto was holding something back but decided not to ask him about it. "Your graduation was irregular, though I don't think that is a bad thing. My country's graduation exam was very different." Naruto, not catching the past tense, asked, "What country is that?" "Izushio, one that is long dead." "I'm sorry." The girl shook her head, "Do not be, I have had plenty of time to grieve." Naruto actually looked down, not quite sure what to say. Mito continued as if Naruto didn't interrupt. "Our shinobi hopefuls were taken into a secluded island, armed with only a kunai and our personal skills. The hopefuls were forced to wear thin clothing, which provided little protection against the elements. The objective was survival for a solid week." Spying on Takeshi's raiment stand and knowing Naruto's love of ramen, she decided to lead the boy in that direction. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. "So you didn't need to learn a certain language or take a written exam?" "Techniques were taught prior to the exam, of course. However, if one of our genin didn't master a technique, like say the Bunshin no Jutsu for example, they simply had to take the exam without it." Takeshi waved at both Naruto and Mito, cheerfully. When they sat down he gave Naruto an odd look. It was like the man was giving him a thumbs up with his eyes. He didn't even know how that was even possible. "What can I do for you two kids?" "I would like a bowl of shrimp ramen, please." "Pork for me, old man." Takeshi nodded and turned to go make their order. Naruto turned to look at the girl again feeling a pang of sadness in his dot. "So, any advice on what other Fuin I should learn?" "In your place, I would simply continue learning the basics as best as I could. However, please tread carefully, Naruto-kun. I very much doubt many people in your village will approve of someone with your condition learning Fuin. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Did she mean? Naruto looked at the girl in front of him with a questioning look. She gazed at him for another moment before placing her hand on her stomach and circling around where no doubt her navel was. Naruto's look then turned towards horror. Mito's gaze softened. "I was thinking, Naruto-kun, that I would come visit you in your village." The fact that she wasn't automatically rejecting him calmed Naruto down somewhat. He actually smiled again. "Really? When?" Mito's gaze turned away from Naruto. "I am not entirely sure. You see, I was hoping to find a member of my family, however she is being quite a difficult person to find. Maybe I can help." Mito shook her head, it is something I must do myself. However, if I cannot find her, perhaps I will come to Konoha in the near future. I cannot be certain. Great, I'd like to introduce you to all my friends in Konoha like Iruka and the Hokage, and maybe we can hang out with my teammates again. The girl nodded, that sounds nice, perhaps we will see each other again in a few months. I would very much like to see Hiru-chan again. Naruto cocked an eyebrow, Hiru-chan. Do you know somebody in Konoha? I do, Mito gave him a grin that seemed better suited to his face and her own. And I do believe that he will be quite surprised to see me. Jiraiya of Konoha's legendary Sannin, the great toad sage of Mount Myoboku, the wandering Sennin of the north, south, east, and west, a man who had women throwing themselves at him, was bored beyond reason. He had just had a serious meeting with the old Hokage regarding their old friend, Orochimaru. As a result of the meeting, Hiruzen had decided to order Jiraiya to stay close to the village. So, like a 6-year-old with ADHD, Jiraiya had been positively bored ever since he had gotten out of the conference with the age cage 5 minutes ago. The old man had mentioned that Naruto was in the Chunin exam finals and that his actual sensei had stuck him with a proxy while he trained another of his students. Obviously the old man had hoped that he would pick up the slack and train Minato's son. After a while the toad sage had decided to do just that. The alternative would have been to peek at the women's side of the hot springs, which was admittedly a bit boring. It wasn't that there weren't any beauties in the Konoha hot springs, quite the opposite actually. It was just that Jiraiya had been in and out of that spot so many times that it hardly proved a challenge for him anymore, and that really was half of the fun. So the old man decided on training Naruto, which required tracking the kid down. Jiraiya actually ended up finding Naruto at the hot springs of all places. He immediately recognized the man Kakashi had stuck the boy with as the uptight elite trainer who taught Sarutobi's bratty grandson. That would actually work into his plan, and he'd be able to get a quick peek into the ladies' side of the hot springs while he was at it. He silently summoned a toad, Gameton, which was big enough for him to ride around on to add to the image. Together the pair snuck over to the wall that covered the women's side of the hot springs. Quick peek, check. Jiraiya let the beautiful images he saw burn themselves into his memory. Get elite trainers and brats' attention. Jiraiya began giggling perversely, check. Ibisu turned to glare at the toad sage, just as Jiraiya guessed he would. I will not allow such behavior in my presence. Jiraiya grinned, prove my awesomeness. Gameton turned, grabbed Ibisu with his large tongue, and slammed the man against the ground. Check. Technically it was Gameton's strength, but Jiraiya figured it would have the same effect. Look like a complete badass. Jiraiya glanced towards the boy. If the look of awe on Naruto's face was any indication, the toad sage's plan was obviously working. Check. Jiraiya actually patted himself on the back. He then felt someone next to him. His eyes narrowed, and he turned to see a teenage Riti that appeared on his left. The girl in question was wet and flushed, obviously she had just come out of the baths and was wearing nothing but a towel wrapped around her body. In the blink of an eye, Jiraiya was slammed into the wall. Gameton, deciding on self-preservation, disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto's eyes widened. Though her long red hair was wet and clinging to her face, he had little trouble identifying the girl in front of him. Mito. The girl in question turned to him with dark blue eyes, and then he found it hard to breathe. Naruto, the overwhelming aura froze him to his spot. Explain yourself. Realization dawned on Naruto a second later. Mito thought he was peeping on the women like the old pervert was. He also realized that the girl in front of him could smear him across the ground with very little effort on her part and no doubt a great amount of satisfaction. It's not what it looks like. I was training with the closet pervert. He brought me here to teach me water walking, but I wasn't able to do it well, and then that old pervert showed up and the closet pervert went to stop him, and then the old pervert's frog beat up the closet pervert, and then you showed up and beat him, and I swear I wasn't trying to peek on you or anyone else. Though Naruto didn't have a problem understanding what he had just said, to anyone else it came out fast and high-pitched. Luckily, for him, Mito had experience deciphering such talk in the past. It took her a while, but she managed to understand what it was that Naruto had said. The boy let out a sigh of relief when Mito's kai dissipated. It was a toad. Huh? Mito gestured towards the man. The animal he summoned was a toad, not a frog. Oh, same difference in Naruto's book. Once her mind was clear of murderous thoughts, Mito immediately noticed something was obviously off about Naruto. Wait here, we will go somewhere private when I get back. With that, Mito turned to go back the way she came. 20 minutes later found both Naruto and Mito in one of the training grounds that littered Konoha. The girl had changed into a black kimono, with a red sash keeping it closed. Though she had been brushing it throughout the walk towards the training ground, her scarlet hair was still damp and messily framing her face. Her appearance made the boy blush whenever he looked at her, then images of her in nothing but a towel entered his mind. He silently prayed that she didn't find out what he was thinking about. Naruto-kun. Startled, Naruto jumped at the sound of her voice. Yay. The red girl sat on a rock, still brushing away at her hair. Take off your jacket and shirt. Naruto's eyes widened and his blush deepened. What? Mito just gave him a dry look. You have something on your body. I am sensing a seal on you that was most certainly not there when we met in Wave Country. I would like to have a look at it. That cinched his suspicions from way back. She did know and she didn't care. I got another seal on me. How? Naruto unzipped his jacket. She placed a hairbrush on the rock and began walking towards the boy. You tell me. He tossed his jacket on the ground and took off his shirt as well. Mito placed her hand next to his navel, earning a small blush from the boy. She immediately recognized the problem. Gaju Fuin is a seal used to disrupt the flow of chakra of the one it is placed on. I must imagine that you have had greater difficulty controlling your chakra for quite some time. Naruto's eyes widened. Yay, ever since that creepy snake guy hit me on the stomach. Mito's eyes narrowed. She'd have to get a better account of what happened later. I can remove the seal from you, though I must warn you that it will be quite painful. Before Naruto could react to Mito's statement, the girl's right hand glowed blue and she quickly hit Naruto over the navel. Naruto clenched his teeth to stifle a shout and managed to hold his ground. Mito smiled and patted the boy on the head. She then turned back towards the rock she had been sitting on. Walk on the lake. Naruto nodded and went over to the small lake that was on the side of the training ground. Concentrating on the lesson that Ibisu gave him, Naruto took a careful step onto the surface of the water. To his amazement, it felt as if he was on solid ground. He took a few steps out towards the center of the lake and jumped up and down. He turned back to the girl, giving her his brightest smile. How do you know that I had that seal on me? After training with Fuin for so long, I have developed something of a sixth sense for seals. The girl sighed, her hair wouldn't get much drier in the amount of time she had. Why were you training with? She frowned at the nickname Naruto had given the blue-clothed man, that man. Where is your sensei? Naruto scowled and stopped jumping. He went to train Sasuke team and stuck me with the closet pervert. Mito frowned again. I see. I presume that the two of you are both in the Chunin exams. Yep, the blonde clenched his fist. First I'm going to beat that bastard Niji, and then I'm going to beat everyone else. Another story that Mito felt she would have to get at a later date, for it seemed that Naruto had a grudge against this Niji. Then a thought occurred to Naruto that made him grin. Hey wait, can you train me? It made sense. Ibisu was apparently a special jounin, and he was easily beaten by the toad pervert, and Mito easily beat the toad pervert, won, so she had to be much stronger than both of them. Mito turned to the blonde. She had combed her hair in two intricate buns on either side of her head. She had also hung a white piece of paper, with kanji that he couldn't quite read, from each of the buns. You look pretty. When Naruto realized what he had said, he immediately turned bright red and fell through the surface of the water. Mito, who had actually reddened at the boy's comment, giggled at him. I have to go speak with Hiro-chan now. When I return, we may discuss training. Until that time, please work on the water walking exercise. With that last statement, she turned to walk away. Okazama, the voice of his assistant blared over the intercom. There is a young lady here to see you. She claims to have information regarding Uzumaki Naruto, his assistant finished in a sugar-sweet tone of voice. Hiruzen frowned at that. Somebody coming to talk to him about Naruto usually meant one of two things. Either the boy pranked someone or someone else was looking to complain that the 12-year-old was still breathing. Since he graduated from the academy, it had only been the latter. Pressing down on the intercom's button, he replied, send her in, Shion. Yes, Hokage-sama. A second later, a teenager in a black kimono entered his office. Hello, Hiro-chan. Have you been a good boy? Hiruzen flinched at the sound of the voice. The girl just gave him a smile that he hadn't seen in nearly 24 years. His eyes widened, Mito-sama. It took Hiruzen exactly 2 seconds to regain his composure, 2 seconds too long if one were to ask him. The old man immediately narrowed his eyes and released a wave of killer intent. For her part, the woman seemed unaffected by the Sandame's legendary aura. She just smiled at him. I ask that you please try to relax, Hiro-chan. Enough. The old man barked. Do you have any idea who you are impersonating? You have till the count of 3. He stopped mid-threat when he heard the team before him giggle. She giggled. He had leveled her with the same killer intent that had other cages quaking in fear, and she fucking giggled. Oh, you have become so adorable, Hiro-chan. That was a hit to his pride, something that hasn't happened since he was just a genin. The old man's right eye twitched. I will not tolerate this offense. The man said through gritted teeth. You will tolerate me. All mirth faded from the girl's voice. You are in your 60s and you still have yet to learn proper respect. Hiruzen tensed when he saw her hand move into her pocket. Mito pulled her hand and an object out of her pocket. Hiruzen's eyes widened. His face turned ghostly white. His blood turned cold. For the first time in decades, the third Hokage knew fear. That ended when realization and acceptance spread through his mind. Mito-sama. The girl nodded in response and placed the dreaded item back in her pocket. If you wish, perhaps we can finish this conversation within the Senju compound. I imagine I am still keyed into the blood seal which protects the grounds. The girl paused for a moment. The cherry tree, which overlooks the pond, should be in bloom at this time of year. The sakura petals would provide a lovely atmosphere to drink tea in. 1,000 thoughts ran through Hirizen's mind. The old man put on his poker face. Please have a seat, Mito-sama. The old man gestured towards the chair that was in front of his desk. He still wasn't sure about the girl's identity, but he wasn't willing to discount her yet. His mind raced for ways to prove or disprove the girl's identity. The surest way would be to test her blood with that of a living relative. Unfortunately, he didn't think they had any of Tsunede's DNA on hand, and she wasn't close enough to Naruto for them to test for a relationship. The blood seal on the Senju compound would probably end up being the only true way to test her identity. It was either that or play 20 questions. The buzz of his intercom shook him out of his thoughts. Hokage-sama. Knowing that he was in a meeting, his assistant waited until he answered before continuing. Go ahead, Shion. The Kari-san is here to see you. Hiruzen cursed under his breath. He would have to have a busy day today of all days. If you are busy, I could come back later. No. He pushed the button on his intercom. Shion, please reschedule. No doubt Yamato Hikari would take the slight personally, but he doubted whatever the man had to say was as important as the current meeting. As you wish, Hokage-sama. The old man turned to what should have been a much older woman. Mito smiled back at him. You have taken after your predecessors. She paused for a moment to stare at the picture of Hashirama, her late husband, on the wall. Your secretary is very perky. For the first time in years, Hiruzen blushed. He felt the need to defend himself. Shion is professional and quite capable. I have no doubt that she is. I was merely observing the fact that, out of your entire shinobi force, the one you chose is likely to distract your male visitors. It was an act that your predecessors followed as well. It makes one wonder if all your capable shinobi are young, beautiful kunoichi. Mito turned her head to look at different areas of the room. What do you four boys think? The four Anbu that were hiding around his office were trained enough to not make a sound when Mito addressed them, but it was likely that they were at least surprised that she managed to detect them at all. Was Mito-sama a censor? The old man thought to himself. She never did reveal all of her abilities to him, his senseis didn't even do that. He thought about the convenience of testing the woman's skills. Mito was always a Fuin user of legendary status. An idea then hit Hiruzen a second later. Can you please summon a rabbit for me? A moment later, a foot-tall grey rabbit was standing on the Hokage's desk, staring back at the old man. Hiruzen would honestly think the little guy was cute if he weren't fingering a pair of wicked-looking sickles that were big enough for a human to wield. The eye patch over the animal's right eye, which had a skull emblem, wasn't helping things either. However, the fact that she could summon the creature before him was 1 point in the girl's favor. Hiruzen would still be playing 20 questions though. If somebody ever wrote a biography about the life of the Sandaime, he seriously hoped they didn't ask Mito for information. She knew things about him that he wished would forever remain buried. Not even his teammates knew the things she had mentioned outright. Luckily she didn't go into full details or he'd be forced to swear his bodyguards to secrecy, and yes, he would go that far. The entire meeting had lasted well over an hour, and Hiruzen was more than willing to believe the girl's crazy tale, even without testing out the blood seal at the Senju compound. The sound of his intercom buzzing again popped the old man out of his thoughts. Hokage-sama. Go ahead, Shion. Lidakato-sama and Utatane-sama are both here to see you. Hiruzen cursed under his breath. Having those two here would not be good though, if only to save himself a headache later, he decided to grant them entrance. Please send them both in. Yes, Hokage-sama. The door opened, and the Hokage's two former teammates walked in. They of course noticed the young lady sitting in front of Hiruzen and gave him a questioning look. Please have a seat. They went to do so, planning to take their respective places at Hiruzen's side, when the woman stood up. That's when they both saw her face and gawked. The young lady giggled and patted each of them on the head. Yes, she patted them on the head as if they were small children. Koha-chan, Homu-chan. How have you two been? Mito-sama Kaharu began, with wide eyes. Amura's gaze immediately turned towards Hiruzen. For his part, Hiruzen simply said 3 words. It's really her. Shock and amazement overcame Hamura's face. How is this possible? Hamura asked. You don't look a day over 16. I should be 15. But, how? Kaharu asked. The Uzumaki clan's legendary vitality was, of course, common knowledge to those who were familiar with the clan. The ability they had to live long lives and to survive blows most others would find fatal. Regardless, they had seen the woman, which now stood before them, 24 years ago. 24 years ago she had been naught but an old crone. Now she was a young girl who was yet to even reach the prime of her life, not like a woman who should be close to 100 by this time. They thought back to the woman's granddaughter. Is it a genjutsu? The girl shook her head. It's all biological. The three oldest the three that looked the oldest silently wondered what other secrets were hidden away in the Uzumaki clan's genom. As you all know, I left Konohagakure after transferring the Kyuubi no Kitsune to Kushina-chan. The woman frowned at the thought. She had been so close to death that night, and it was a miracle that she hadn't been bedridden for the rest of her short life. I desired to see my homeland once more before I died. Mito frowned as the memories flooded her mind's eye. The sight she saw was not that of the beautiful village of her childhood, but those of a decaying ruin. It broke her heart. To cut a long story short, I found something left behind by my father, and that is the reason I am still alive today and the reason for my appearance. What did you find? Irideed shook her head, irrelevant. Due to certain rare ingredients, it is unlikely that anyone will ever be able to reproduce my father's research. Even if that were not the case, this she gestured towards herself, is only something that one with Uzumaki blood can take advantage of. That either labeled Mito's secret fountain of youth as either an Uzumaki clan's secret or completely fucking irrelevant to anyone outside the bloodline. Or possibly both, probably both. Hiruzen frowned, how long have you been like this? The young woman clenched her eyes shut. 12 years. It was one of her biggest regrets. If she had been in Konoha during the Kyuubi's attack, then she might have been able to save Kushina from death, or at least could have saved Naruto from the fate of being a Jinchuriki. Why did you wait so long before coming back? 12 years ago, I had the body of a 3-year-old. Luckily the ruins of Yuzushio had plenty of provisions scattered about, however, it had been a nightmare to try and survive in the body of a 3-year-old. In spite of that fact, it was heartbreaking to know that she may have been able to do something, yet not have been around to do it. I spent 10 years in my country before departing and, at that time, I wasn't ready to reveal myself. She had spent that decade training her body to peak physical ability, burying the dead, and remastering abilities that she hadn't used in years. Hiruzen nodded in understanding. So what do you plan to do now? If it would not be an imposition, I had thought about staying in the old Senju compound for some time. Will you attempt to resurrect the Senju clan? Homura asked. Mito shook her head. I lack the blood to do so, for I was a Senju in name alone. Any hope the Senju has of being revived rests with my granddaughter. Sadness enveloped Mito for just a moment. If I decide to do so, the only clan I could take part in resurrecting is the Uzumaki clan. The old woman's eyes narrowed. You wish to place the boy under your control, Kaharu accused. Mito narrowed her eyes at the accusation, if you wish to see it that way. In truth, I just want to make sure that my last clanmate has a stable environment to hone his abilities. The oldest looking woman scoffed, the boy is being watched and provided for by this council, you have no need to interfere with him. Mito glared at the other woman, yes, I have heard of the results of your guardianship. Forgive me if I do not fully approve of the outcome. That received 3 different reactions from the 3 elders. Hiruzen kept his face neutral, though one could see underlying feelings of shame in his face. Kaharu was clearly insulted at the insinuation. Homura appeared to be somewhere in the middle of his teammates. Speaking of which, may I know why you deemed it necessary to keep his ancestry from him? The third Hokage frowned. I feared the knowledge would be leaked to the wrong people and Naruto would become a target against his parents' enemies. So I kept the knowledge of his lineage a secret from all but a handful of people. Mito narrowed her eyes. This hypothetical situation where outsiders learned of Naruto's ancestry, you believe it to be worse than a no-name orphan being surrounded by people who have a grudge against a demon that resides inside of him. Hiruzen frowned. Even he had to admit that his decision sounded bad when she said it that way. Somehow, the scolding she just gave him plus the frown made Hiruzen feel 12 years old again. Though Tobirama and, under rare circumstances, Hashirama were the ones who taught him and helped him refine his abilities, it was Mito who kept him from doing stupid things like practicing high level on his teammates. Phantom pains suddenly erupted from his backside. I truly didn't believe the people would hold Naruto's condition against him. When I saw that they did, I passed a law that forbade anyone from telling the younger generation of the truth about Naruto. He didn't know why he felt the need to justify his actions. It was my belief that Naruto could still have a normal childhood if he and his generation didn't know the truth about what happened 12 years ago. He assumed Mito would at least accept his decision. Instead, a look of horror passed over the girl's features. You did not tell Naruto the truth. Mito immediately glared at the trio before her. How could you? The question was barely above a whisper, though everyone in the room heard her voice it. Again, the Sandaime frowned. Naruto was young. I feared what that information would do to a child. It was my intention to tell him everything when he became a genin. Your intention? Hiruzen's mouth snapped closed. He had wanted to be the one to tell Naruto everything, and then Mizuki swooped in and screwed everything up, too. After Hiruzen's explanation, the girl just shook her head. I should have returned sooner. That small statement definitely had a large impact on Hiruzen and his council. Expressions ranged between hurt and angered. The Redeed just sighed. Well, you may have meant well, Hiruzen, I believe your actions caused more harm than good. The child deserves to know where he comes from, and it was cruel of you to keep the truth from him. The aged Cage sighed. He had thought so as well. The only reason he hadn't revoked his decision was because he felt he had been too far in. He had already lied to Naruto numerous times. Everything was just so much more complicated than it really should have been. I will, of course, inform him of the truth when I see him next. You can't do that. Koharu seethed. It was decided long ago that Uzumaki would not learn of his lineage until he was deemed mature enough by this council. Mito's head slowly turned towards Koharu. She took a few small steps towards the old councilwoman and gave her a slight smile. Young lady, I seem to recall the last time you tried to stick your nose into my clan's business. Koharu's face turned bright red. I bent you over my knee and spanked your bottom until it was as red as my hair. If the Anbu in the room weren't trained as well as they were, they would probably be laughing their asses off right about now. As it was, they just stood there quietly, suppressing all sense of amusement they received from the girl's statement and the priceless look on Koharu's face. If nothing else, they were professionals until they were off duty, of course. Tell me, Mito continued, do you think I lack the ability to do so again right now? Koharu glared daggers at the woman before her. She stood up and pointed towards Mito, the Kyuubi, and its host, as a weapon that belongs to the village of Konoha, not you. This council. Mito reached into one of the pockets of her kimono and pulled out an orange leather glove. Hiruzen's, Hamura's, and Koharu's eyes widened at the sight. It was. The orange-colored butt injurer, 3. Mito's ultimate weapon for spanking children who were not good boys girls. That glove had tasted more ass than Jiraiya during one of his brothel outings. Fun fact. With that very glove, Mito has spanked all 4 of the past Hokages. Now for a brain bleach moment. Only 3 of which actually considered it a form of punishment. Another interesting fact was that Senju Tabarama truly hated that name. Uchiha Madara thought it was hilarious. The hare watched, with fearful eyes, as Mito slowly slipped the glove over her right hand. The old woman immediately sat down and shut her mouth. The Redeed gave Koharu one last look, as if daring her to say something else. It was obvious that the physical damage caused by the dreaded Toby was eclipsed only by the psychological damage that it caused. When it became obvious that Koharu wouldn't be saying anything else, Mito turned to look at Hiruzen. It had been the second time he had seen Mito's glove in the last hour, so he was bearing slightly better than his former teammates. Slightly. Mito-sama. Kyuubi does not belong to you. Mito narrowed her eyes. To any of you. It was defeated by my late husband, Senju Hashirama, and I was the one who first captured it. Since that moment, the Kyuubi has been a sword that's been wielded by the Uzumaki to protect Konoha, and it will be no different with Naruto. You may spend your time debating whether Yoko belongs to the Senju clan or to the Uzumaki clan if you wish. Regardless, I currently represent both clans. Mito stared straight at Hiruzen. Not one of you understands what it is like to be the host of a Biju. So no, you do not get an opinion on this matter. She sent a dark look towards Koharu, who had seemingly started to hyperventilate. When will you tell him? Mito stood up from her position. He has asked me to prepare him for the finals of the upcoming exams, so I believe I will tell him right away. The redhead paused for a moment to stare at Hiruzen directly. Also, it seems your student was peeping on the woman's side of the hot springs again. Hiruzen scowled at the new information. The man had said he would be going to speak with Naruto. Mito turned to leave, but briefly looked back towards Hiruzen. I will likely keep to the Senju compound. Please visit us at your earliest convenience and we can have that tea. With that last statement, Uzumaki Mito left the Hokage's office. Mito found Naruto back in the training ground that she had originally left him in. He was still practicing walking on water, but he had actually started going through different katas. The Redeed approved of that. Naruto stopped the moment he saw her. Hey Mito. The blonde waved. He then fell through the surface of the water, eliciting a look of shock from the redhead. The genin then burst through the surface of the water, did a flip and landed on his hands. He then raised one of his arms so that it was parallel to the water. I got this one down. Mito still looked shocked. She opened her mouth to speak, but quickly shut it when she noticed something. Her head turned towards the right of the clearing and her eyes narrowed. I believe Hiruchan would like to speak with you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Huh? The girl didn't answer him, she just kept staring off to the side. After several moments, she turned to look at Naruto. Forgive me, but it seems that the old pervert from the hot springs was spying on you. Really? He flipped himself upright, still on the lake, and quickly looked towards the area that Mito had just been staring at. He is gone now, please do not worry yourself over him. The girl smiled at him and decided to steer the conversation back towards his training and progress. I am astounded that you were able to achieve so much as quickly as you did. Naruto grinned and wiped some water away from his face. Ever since Kaka-sensei taught me how to climb trees with chakra, I've been doing a lot of the training I normally did on the ground, from the trees. I figured it would be useful to be able to fight that way. Mito nodded, again surprised. She knew, from working with the boy during their time together in Wave Country, that there were gaps in Naruto's education. What she hadn't known was that he truly had the instincts of a warrior. His sensei had given him a little exercise, and he had taken so much from it. Shame that his growth had been stunted so early on. She vowed to correct it. About your training. If possible, Naruto's smile widened. Are you going to train me? What are you going to teach me? How long are you going to be in Konoha for? You want to go to the Ichiraku ramen stand, they're way better than old man Takeshi's stand. She decided that he certainly didn't lack the energy. There are some things that we must discuss first. Perhaps we can go somewhere private. Naruto shrugged, which Mito took as an affirmative. Follow me please. Naruto nodded and quickly followed after the girl. Hey, did you ever find that relative of yours? Though Naruto couldn't see it, Mito actually frowned at the question. I did not. I will attempt to look for her again at a later date. To Naruto's surprise, the duo walked clear across the village before arriving at Mito's mysterious location. The blonde had offered his own apartment, but she had been dead set on going to the one she had chosen, which was much nicer than his apartment, Naruto silently admitted. Mito looked at the great gates of the Senju estate with more than a little bit of nervousness in her stomach. It has been too long, she made a show of drawing blood from her palm, not doubting for a moment that Hiruzen had had his agents tailing her since she left his office and smeared it over the invisible seal on the gates. Unsurprisingly, to her at least, the great gates opened, allowing Mito to walk inside at her leisure. Naruto, who had been a bit surprised that the gates opened, seemingly on their own, followed her a moment later. The grounds were the same as they had always been. Judging from the state of the mansion, the Senju compound had not been tended to for well over a decade, yet the plants still looked as beautiful and healthy as ever, such was the power of the first Hokage. The most beautiful tree on the grounds was a cherry tree that was in full bloom, which overlooked a pond just east of the mansion. On the opposite side of the mountain was a giant 200-foot sequoia, which dwarfed nearly every building in the village. Aside from those two, there were various kinds of plants and trees littering the grounds, which offered a great diversity of ingredients for herbalists and alchemists, or they would have if any had ever been allowed on the grounds. Naruto looked in awe at all the plants around the estate. He recognized some of the species in the gardens as plants that he himself tended to, but they all seemed healthier and shinier than his plants though. Such was the power of the first Hokage. Come along, Naruto. Together the two walked into the house. Mito noticed with more than a little disgust that there was a sheet of dust covering everything. As she had assumed, the house had not been tended to for quite some time. She'd need to clean up before inhabiting the place. Naruto again began exploring the place. The first thing he did was look at some pictures that were hanging on the walls, if only to get an idea of whose home he was currently in. To his surprise, he recognized two people right away in the frames. How could he not, they were the first two of the village. He stared at one picture of the Shadame and the woman that was standing right next to him. His head snapped towards Mito. Is this your mom heir? He silently remembered that the first was actually older than old man Hokage, grandma. Mito stared at the picture that Naruto was pointing to. No, actually that is me. It took a moment for Naruto to fully process what she said. Huh. That is me, 60 years ago. Naruto looked at the girl as if she had grown a second head. Mito looked Naruto straight in the eyes. Naruto, I have not been entirely honest with you. It was a lie of omission, but a lie nonetheless. When that picture was taken, my name was Senju Mito, but before that I was known as Uzumaki Mito. Naruto's eyes widened. Uzumaki? Mito nodded. As far as I know, the two of us are the last members of the Uzumaki clan that populated Uzushiogakure. I used to live here in Konoha, but I left over 2 decades ago. The reason that I am, biologically, a teenager now is because of a last gift that my father left behind for me. What, like a fountain of youth? The girl's face scrunched up, a suitable metaphor, though my father's legacy was a bit more complicated. And you were married to the first Hokage? She nodded, a long time ago. Though it was an arranged marriage, Mito couldn't say that she hadn't grown to love the founder of Konoha. They had a child together. Naruto shut his eyes as he went through the information in his head. It actually sounded crazy to him, but why would she lie except to screw with him? Sadly, a lot of people had done just that in the past that he was willing to believe in the latter. There is more that you must know. I was the very first human container of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Naruto's eyes widened. What? Mito nodded. I was the very first demon container, as a matter of fact. When other villages learned about what I had done to the Kyuubi, the process of sealing the Bijuu into humans started. The Redeed looked at Naruto for a few moments. Therefore, I am indirectly responsible for you being a Jinchuriki. The blonde had paled and backed himself against a nearby wall so he could lean against it. Mito took a few steps towards him but stopped when he gave her a glare. Though she was a little hurt by the look on Naruto's face, she couldn't blame him for it either. And she wasn't done just yet. I also sealed the Kyuubi into its second container, your mother. And with that, Naruto's legs wobbled and he slid down the wall and to the floor. Mito didn't move from her spot. Though she wanted to, she refused to move closer until Naruto gave her permission to approach him. The tales of the Kyuubi being a force of nature were not exaggerated, and unlike the other Bijuu, it could not be sealed inside of an inanimate object. During a vicious conflict, I had no choice but to seal the beast within my own body, if only to quell it. She paused for a moment to allow that part of the story to sink in. I kept the beast inside of me for decades, but I soon grew too old to do so for much longer. A new container was needed and due to our supernatural vitality, a young girl of our clan was chosen. That girl was your mother. Naruto held his head with both hands, hiding his face. Some time after your mother was sealed I left. Months after your mother came to Konoha, our ancestral home was set upon and our clan annihilated. I believed I was close to death and I desired to see my old home once more before I left this world. And then I found my father's gift. The girl looked away for several moments. I had no idea the consequences my actions would lead to. Though I sealed the Kyuubi to change the course of a battle, it seems that I also damned you and several others to a terrible life, for that I am truly sorry Naruto. The blonde shook his head. After a while, Naruto lowered his hands. I thought it was just a name. Uzumaki, it was just a name to me. I didn't even think it was the real last name of either of my parents, so it was meaningless to me. Mito flinched at that statement. But it was the only name I had so I wanted to make it something that everyone would know. Now I find out I have a mom with the same name and I used to have a clan in Kami. I don't know what to do with all of that. Naruto turned to look at the teenager old lady in front of him. His eyes lost all traces of anger and just held uncertainty. Mito took that as permission to approach him. She pressed her back against the wall and slid down it to sit right next to him. The old man never told me anything about my parents, the blonde said bitterly. In his own way, Hiro-chan was trying to protect you. Mito frowned. I do not think he went about it the right way, but his intentions were just. Any other day, Naruto would have enjoyed the nickname for the old Hokage immensely. Instead Naruto just shook his head again. I just hate the fact that everybody, he threw his arms up high, knows more about me than I know about myself. It's not fucking fair. He glared at the girl next to him. Even you. You know more about me than I do and we just met a few months ago. I don't even know if you're lying to me like everyone else. Mito turned away. I have no evidence that you would find acceptable. The girl immediately stood up and walked away from the scene, with Naruto looking on after her. She returned a few moments later with a picture in her hand, which she handed to Naruto. The picture contained a blonde young woman standing next to a small retarded child. The blonde is my granddaughter and the other is your mother. Tears stung at Naruto's eyes and he had to force them not to fall. Again, she sat down next to him. Hate me if you wish, I will not fault you for doing so. However, please know that I will tell you anything you desire to know, Naru-kun. Though it is likely that you will not like everything I have to say, I swear upon our fallen kinsman that I will never lie to you again. I don't hate you, Naruto said, barely above a whisper. Mito felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Naruto looked towards her. Did you know my dad? Namek is Minato as I understand it. The fourth. Mito nodded. Naruto smacked himself on the head and balled his fist in his hair. Soft hands latched onto him and he looked up to see Mito frowning at him. Please stop. Naruto let go of his hair and allowed Mito to pull his hand away. She kept holding it. Wait, if my mom was the Kyuubi container, why did it attack 12 years ago? The redhead frowned. I am unsure as of yet. It is something that I will be investigating thoroughly though. When I have compassed an appropriate report, I will happily give it to you. The blonde nodded. Damn it, I was supposed to train today. I don't even feel like moving now. Mito sighed. If you still want me to, I can help you train for your Chunin exams. The redhead's face scrunched up for a moment. Tomorrow, though. Today, I would like to attempt to make this building habitable. What will you teach me? It will be difficult. The girl frowned for a moment. It will be very difficult, perhaps more so than anything that you have ever done. What I have in mind is also very dangerous, so it would require you to stay with me so that I can keep an eye on you. Naruto looked around at her last statement. Here. Mito nodded. For the immediate future. I will also demand absolute obedience. At this, Mito narrowed his eyes. I expect you to follow my every command. If you do not, I will dismiss you as my student permanently. Jinchuriki frowned, but nodded his head in acceptance. The girl wasn't done yet though. I will employ methods most cruel on you and expect compliance when doing so. However, if you follow my criteria, I promise that you will be more than satisfied with the results. Again Naruto nodded at her. Alright, I'm in. Mito smiled, good. Tell me, do you know anything about your opponents? Naruto frowned, still feeling mentally drained. My first fight is against that bastard Neji. Thinking back to what he had done to Hinata did nothing to ease his mental fatigue. His cousin was a classmate of mine and he beat her up really badly and they are cousins from the same clan. Which clan do they hail from? Naruto's face scrunched up, I think they said the Hyuga clan. The redhead nodded. You watched this Neji fight, tell me what you think your chances are. Naruto's face twisted into a scowl, I'll kick his ass no problem. Please, tell me without any haughtiness. The truth, how did he look when he battled his cousin? You could say a lot about a Hyuga's skill by watching them do battle with another Hyuga. The blind sided. I could barely see him move. I could barely see Hinata move, and I don't think she even touched him. The girl nodded. That says quite a bit. The Hyuga clan is renowned for their taijutsu style. The greatest strategy to use against them would be to keep them at a distance. However, it would be unwise to not train your physical abilities, so I plan to train you to the breaking point. What taijutsu style did the Uzumaki clan use? Unlike the Hyuga, our clan didn't have one universal style that all of our clan used, however the Aoryuken was the most infamous. It is an open palm style that was hybridized with Fuin Da. The Uzumaki clan used Fuin Jutsu in their taijutsu style. Mito nodded and held up a hand. It is possible to learn how to draw seal arrays with your chakra. By your account, I believe the ninja who placed the Gajo Fuin on you made use of this technique. Naruto nodded, thinking back to the snake nin back in the Forest of Death. Mito curled her fingers and placed her pointer and index fingers on his right shoulder. With just a touch, I could place a seal on you that would increase your weight by roughly 20 pounds. If I were to place this seal on one side of your body, like say one arm, then the array would disrupt your balance. I could also place a seal on you that would give you an electrical shot every time you tried to mold chakra. And that, as they say, is only the tip of the iceberg. Naruto grinned when an image entered his head. Can you put an explosive seal on someone? She shook her head, the seal array required for an explosive seal is far too large and requires far too much prep work to weaponize in such a manner. That was a bit disappointing, however Naruto decided that the style still seemed really cool. Besides, it was apparently a part of his clan's legacy. Can you teach me? Mito nodded, I would like to, however the technique that allows one to inscribe arrays with chakra is a difficult one to learn and time consuming. I have something else in mind for tomorrow. For now you should go home and bring enough clothing to last you an entire month. Then perhaps you can assist me by cleaning up whatever room I assign to you. Mito racked her mind and tried to figure out where to put the boy. Though the Senju compound had close to 50 bedrooms, not all of them were furnished. On the contrary, the last time she was here only 4 of them were. Mito's and Hashirama's, Tsunade's, Tobirama's, Nawaki's and Kushina's during the few years that she had been too young to live by herself. She didn't want to put him in Tsunade's room. Nawaki's room had been, essentially, turned into a shrine by his sister. She shuddered to think what they would find in Tobirama's room. Though honorable, the man had been a rascal in his youth. He had never married, but that hadn't stopped him from finding someone to lay next to him nearly every night. In fact, there was an urban legend around Konoha that it was he who first invented used for birth control out of necessity over anything else. After the man passed, Mito had all but locked the room up and vowed never to open it. She shuddered at the idea of Naruto staying there. His mother's room was. Your mother stayed with us for several years when she was a little girl. Naruto stiffened at the comment. Though bare, it still has her furniture. If you wish, you can stay there for the next month. Naruto nodded. Good, now go. We have a great deal of work to do tonight and even more work to do for the rest of this month. The NDE. Amic. Revenge. Hiruzen was once again furiously working in his office when his secretary buzzed in. Hokage-sama. The old man pressed down on the intercom, go ahead Shion. Naruto-kun is here to see you. Hiruzen's frowned, he had been expecting Naruto for some time now. Mito likely told him everything regarding his parents and he wanted to vent his anger at being lied to for so long. Please send him in. He figured he owed the boy that much at least. Yes, Hokage-sama. Naruto entered his office a moment later with a shit-eating grin on his face. The old man actually had to raise an eyebrow. Naruto-kun. The boy walked all the way up to his desk and leaned over it, his hands were behind his back. Hello, Hiru-chan. The old man narrowed his eyes, the fuck did you just call me? The old man got up, placed his hands on his desk and leaned over so that his face was closer to the boy. Naruto. The boy pulled his arms from behind his back and waved his right hand in front of Hiruzen's face. The old man paled. Naruto was wearing Tobi, then Sarutobi fainted, slamming his head against the desk at the same time. Naruto cackled and turned to leave, but turned back at the last moment to walk towards the old man's prone body. He grabbed the old man's hat and placed it on his own head. Then he walked away. "Damn straight I'm taking your hat." Sadly, the Anbu watching the events unfold were far too amused to stop the boy. Amic. Best lessons. Many Konoha shinobi of later generations discussed the nature of the Sannin. More specifically, who of the three was the strongest. The most popular choice was Senju Tsunade, though it was mostly a feminist thing, some women voted for her without even thinking about it. Those who did think about it noted her powerful healing abilities and godlike strength. Orochimaru was the second most popular choice. His mastery of forbidden techniques marked him as the most dangerous of the three. Then there was Jiraiya, the least popular. Though in truth, the Sannin were all S-rank shinobi, so a minor difference in power was irrelevant. Jiraiya had an edge over the other two, though not because of power level. It's because one Uzumaki Mito managed to impart in him a lesson that she never managed to give to the other two. An old Mito stood in front of a 12-year-old Jiraiya. The boy in question was strapped to a machine. Mito was fingering what looked to be a remote control. "Where are your teammates?" Orochimaru said his time would be better spent learning something useful, and Tsunade didn't want to come here. Mito sighed. "Very well. I am going to put you in a hypothetical situation and then ask what you would do next. Do you understand?" Jiraiya nodded. "You gain the upper hand in battle, your opponent is lying on the ground in front of you. He isn't defeated, but it seems improbable that he can turn the tide of the battle. What do you do?" Jiraiya scoffed. "Obviously I taunted him, poked fun at his views on life, and told him I'm going to destroy everything he cherishes." Mito pressed the button, and Jiraiya felt a current of electricity go through his body. "Aiya." The old woman sighed. "The correct answer is, you finish the battle as quickly and efficiently as possible." Next question. You are in a similar situation, you perform an amazing feat to turn the tide of a battle, and your opponent clearly doesn't understand what it was that you did and asks you to explain it to him or her. What do you do? I explain it to them as slowly as possible, bringing out visuals and flashbacks if necessary. Shakaya. Mito sighed again. The correct answer is, you deny them the information and finish the battle as quickly and efficiently as possible. Next question. You clearly outnumber an enemy force, what do you do? Split up. Shakaya. The electricity eventually stopped. I sent in my forces in order from weakest to strongest. Shakya. It would be a long night, but Jiraiya would eventually learn the lesson that Mito set out to teach him, and it was because of that early lesson that Jiraiya would become the strongest of his teammates. Though Tsunade would eventually piece together the lesson herself, she would still lack certain parts of it. Orochimaru never learned the lesson. That was probably because the man loved to talk to whoever was willing to listen, and even those that weren't. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Jakofplatisks for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.